Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. And today's webinar is being given by George Haremate from AgResearch, who's been looking at the link between co-innovation and that way of working and how it works for those people in AgResearch who are working with Māori, and how does it also work for Māori who are engaging with research. So thank you very much for coming along, everybody, and I'll hand over to George to start his presentation.
Kia ora tātou katoa. My name is George Haremate. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm about to begin my talk on Māori farming and co-innovation. First of all, I must acknowledge ko taki timu te waka, ko auraki te maunga, ko wairewa te roto, ko tainui, and ngai tahu te iwi. And as James said, my name is George Haremate, and I'm a researcher at AgResearch in Maori agribusiness. There's a government push on to increase the productivity of Maori land, and this push is expected to grow. The government has used the mantra of 80% of Maori land is underused, and they are saying this because they want to increase gross domestic product and for their re-election prospects, as well as aiming to help Māori. Now, today my talk is going to be based on how to engage with Māori, and in particular with the how institutional support, organisation readiness, and Māori readiness all kind of come together in this space to provide better outcomes for both research organisations like ours and for the end users, which are Māori, and which obviously has benefits for the wider economy. Now, while this first slide might seem a little facetious in its presentation, there is a lot going on here. If you leave anything to chance with Māori, they will spot it. And if that is the case, then your chances of success recede slightly. So it is very, very relevant and very, very important to be as ready as you can. Don't leave anything to chance. And by the way, Māori don't particularly care what you look like. They are looking to look directly into your hearts. Okay, the next, the first institution I want to talk about is the New Zealand government. You know, they are the most important institution to Māori farmers and Māori agribusiness. Lately, there has been an acceleration of treaty settlements, which means that Māori are being redressed for their land losses and the loss of their culture and other things like that. However, these treaty settlements usually amount to 1 or 2% of their actual losses. So we might say they are tokenistic, but we're grateful to be receiving anything we can after 180 years of virtual nothing. As I said before, the government seeks to see growth in the economy and gross domestic product. They do retain control by these methods, and they are also looking to double production in the next 20 or 30 years. This leaves us with a bit of a conundrum, of course, because we also know that there is not going to be any growth, or the growth that they want to see via the status quo. Therefore, they need to look to different ways to achieve their targets. Now, how this is accomplished through Māori is that the government allocates their budgets, and their funding goes through the government department called the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, and they have a pie, so to speak, in which they cut up and award to different companies through competitive biddings and the likes. Now, how the government has come to the party for Māori in particular is the institution of a Vision Mātauranga clause, which means that, well, its intent is to include Māori in science projects and in farming success and decision making. So what happens is if an entity wants to apply for funding they have to address a vision mātauranga clause, which means that they have to explain how they are going to include Māori in their science projects. And this has been a very valuable thing for Māori, and it is tangible evidence of their government, of our government, supporting what we intend to do. We would do this by weaving in Māori knowledge and by using both sets of knowledge equally to solve problems, particularly Māori knowledge in science projects is useful in identifying problems, whereas the strengths of Western science is around mitigation of problems and involving the hard sciences in like solving ecological problems and environmental problems. However, there are a couple of problems with vision mātauranga. The biggest problem that I have encountered with it, or the biggest flaw in it, is that the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment have left the definition of vision mātauranga with the individual organisations, which means that different companies can say what it means to them. So we will have different standards throughout a number of different organisations. The other problem I see with it is that there is no enforcement for these provisions other than at bedtime. So the government has not seen fit to really, or not seen fit as yet, to determine how effective these strategies are and what can be made to improve them, etc. So, like I said, all of this is based upon the government's assertion that 80% or up to 80% of Maori land is not being used properly. It's a bit of a pity because I have not seen any evidence for this statement. However, moving past the government, we now move to organisational readiness, and for us that's AgResearch. And if AgResearch has had their bid approved by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, it means they've passed the Vision Mātauranga test. So now it is up to the organisations to provide proper support for what they want to do. And in the first instance, what that means is that they must carefully choose the right people and provide what they require in order to carry out their job. What this inevitably means is that Māori experts are needed, and what they will bring with them are alternative methods and flexibility, which are probably the two most recorded, shall we say, sticking points around working with Māori, is that things can change very quickly, and science organisations like ours usually have fixed time schedules and budgets, which inevitably leads to clashes. So providing what Māori require is not an easy thing for organisations, especially if they are entrenched in working with Western methods. I'm happy to report today that as far as our company AgResearch goes, there is evidence of change. There is evidence of big change. However, there is far more needed, and the problems with the company is that they are results driven, and that these kinds of things, like working with Māori, like I said, are going to take flexibility and alternative methods which clash. So while there is much being done, there is more that could be going on, but as far as my experience goes, the time is right for Māori to be taking advantage of what is available. Okay, so now we move on to Māori. Here we have my friends Patrick, Squidward and SpongeBob. And that is one state of Māori readiness, which is complete denial. And I'm going to show you another few in a second. But Māori readiness has been determined and greatly assisted by the treaty settlements, even though they are not a true reflection of our losses. It's a starting point for many. Okay, Māori also know that they require assistance from science organisations and from other organisations that can provide them with assistance. And without beating around the bush, we know that there have been problems within Māori readiness, and the three outstanding ones are capacity, capability, and underperformance. There is no denying it. There is no running away from it. Māori need to up their game as well. It is not a one-sided equation. And as you might expect, in different areas of the country, Māori are in different stages of readiness. However, there are many things or good things that are able to be capitalized on with Māori. One of them is that we love to work when we see that the right incentives are available, and the Māori will turn things into a competition, and they will work harder than you just to say that they did. The other thing that is glaringly helpful is that there is a huge innovation capacity built into our culture. So these are things that can be taken advantage of, but we are not there yet. As far as other stages of readiness goes, we've got this. We're all over the place. Some are ready, some are not ready, some are getting on with it, and some are hugely successful already. And in my mind, I am thinking about an organization, a dairy farm organization in the North Island, who are worth, I believe, 9 figures. And while this might be the aspirations for some, it is not the aspirations for all. However, each project should be determined on its own merits, and each group of Māori will be evaluated to see where they are along this continuum, and with a bit of luck in getting in and working together, we might be able to change this picture. All right, thank you for your attention in this first piece. I want to stop now for questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, George, for that great introduction. I really like the way you framed it around the readiness of organisations and Māori to engage. As before, if you've got questions, type them into the question box there, and I can share them with George. And while you're doing that, a question that I have for you, George, is picking up on that importance of flexibility and being able to change activities in an organisation to respond to new needs as they're working with Māori. That's something that's very common in co-innovation as well. So what about at the individual level? What are some of the capabilities that individuals need to be able to work with Māori?
Well, especially at the higher levels and in the beginning, a high degree of Maori knowledge is very important to be able to forge the necessary relationships with the Maori groups that you're working with. These people need to be experts in what we would call tikanga and kawa and marae protocols and everyday conversation, and these are skills that need to be brought to the workplace. They can't be learned properly at a work site unless there are years spent training these people. And one of the problems has been a difficulty in retaining people to continue the work, and because Māori like a holistic kind of a program, they like continuation of the same people carrying on relationships and things like that, because naturally it makes the relationships easier to disconnect and connect again, and to be able to make things fine track and to be able to move smoother. The personalities of the individuals are very important for this.
Okay, thanks, George. Yeah, we've got some questions coming in. One is if you're seeing evidence that vision mātauranga is working for Māori, and also is it working for science?
Yes. Well, I mean, that's the short answer. Now, we actually tested our engagement strategies with a Maori organization where we used Maori techniques of engagement, which were specifically cultural things that we were cultural methods of engagement, the way we were talking, the kinds of things that we were doing to engage with people. And we found that when we surveyed what was done, we found an 80% or 85% success rate with using Maori methods of engagement with Maori. So yes, and it is only through things like Vision Mātauranga that things like this are coming to the front of science as opposed to being added at the end.
Okay, great. Thanks, George. We've also got a question that sort of backs up a little bit around what you mean by readiness, and perhaps you started answering that around the evidence that you found that working in the particular way that works for Māori gets results. But can you elaborate a bit more on what you mean by readiness and the purpose of that readiness?
Well, in my work, I have found that I have had one case study in particular where the group of Maori that I was working with were not ready to be worked with. And what you typically find is that they won't be particularly upfront about this, but they will give other excuses and put the work off. So being ready basically means that there is a fertile field to plow, so to speak, that the preparation work has been done. And if we're talking about Maori readiness, that means that a lot of behind the scenes work happens in preparing the way to be able to talk as equals. Now, of course, this happens at many different levels, and on the formal level, it happens at a porphyry stage, which is kind of people coming into relationships with unknowns that they make inquiries about amongst each other, and they find strands of commonality that they are able to work with. And that is what we mean by readiness, is that finding opportunities that especially participatory kinds of work might happen, because that's what Maori want to see. They want to see words, and then they want to see those words backed up with action. So that's kind of what readiness is. It's about being able to go in there and work in a way that these people want to see you work. And that it only comes through having the right people who are prepared to do this work and do it in a particular way that is acceptable to those who we're working with.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, George. No other questions at this stage, so you're happy to carry on?
Yeah. This part of the presentation will go quite quickly, but yeah, it kind of follows on from these questions that I've been given. So thank you for that. Now, we come to the question of what do Māori want from these relationships? Well, Māori want to be listened to, and they want to have their culture respected. They definitely want partnerships and alliances with companies and people who have experienced success in the past, because they realize, obviously, that if they can reproduce that success, then they will be successful too. Māori have also been studied to the umpteenth degree. Many are now cutting through the research part and just want the results, which is kind of fair enough in some ways, but obviously we've got to go through processes to be able to get there. Maori want to be included. They've always wanted to be included, and now, you know, this has been the best opportunity so far for this to happen. And Maori also want to work together. Like I said just before, they don't want to see people getting up and talking to them. Well, that will work fine up to a degree, but then if Maori see that people's words and their actions do not match, you won't get much further than that, and they will lose interest. Okay. When all is said and done, with you know, on the bigger picture, I mean, Maori want to see the well-being of people. We want the resources to be sustainable. They want successful businesses, and they want successful relationships to continue. When they know that their land, their knowledge, their language, and the culture is respected, you will find working with Maori to be a joy, and you will make friends, lifelong friends, not just business acquaintances. And finally, we've got to note that success is measured differently in each community. You know, we recently had a land symposium down here in Lincoln for Ngāi Tahu, and there were people talking about their dairy operations, and there were people talking about their dairy chain operations, and there were people talking about how they just wanted a house and some land to live on and a bit of help to get things going for themselves. So, and I mean, I would imagine that this is more throughout the rural communities, as these people were from the rural communities. They have no dreams like some of the corporation farmers have. You know, billions of dollars means nothing to them. They just want to live peaceful, quiet lives. And I would imagine that that is similar to all segments of all people of society. There is a wide range within all segments of societies, and so Māori are no different. Now, as far as the engagement goes, it is best left to experts. We have all kinds of reports and all kinds of studies that have been done and have experienced mixed results, and they all point to some kind of relationship problems. And this is best averted by hiring experts who bring their cultural knowledge to the workplace. This is the critical part of the relationship to Māori. If this isn't done properly, the chances are that the results will be mixed, because if you begin a few centimeters out of whack, you will end up meters or kilometers off track, and that's what it is. There's no going past it. Now, engagement is best done face-to-face. It is also best done beyond the scope of employment and outside of business hours. Once again, this points to the flexibility and the clashes with time and budgets, which organizations like mine, AgResearch that is, have. Well, it's an obstacle that still needs to be overcome. And I don't think we're ever going to see this go away. I think there will always be problems around this, because it stems from the fact that Māori do not care about the time it takes to reach a decision. It is the decision that is the important bit, and if it takes years, it doesn't matter. Engagement, when scientists are brought in and technicians are brought into the relationship, background information needs to be provided beforehand. Now, this has a number of benefits in that it gets Māori and scientists and technicians off on the same foot. They each know a little bit about each other and what each other is going to do and what they're trying to achieve, and that helps the relationship grow, and it gives them something to talk about as they are working side by side. If you work with Māori on their terms, your chances of success are greatly higher. And as I said before in one of the questions that were asked, we've tested our methods of engagement, and they have proved to be successful. Okay, now we're talking about Māori knowledge and integration with science. This is how Māori knowledge can be used with with science. This is a very good example. This picture is actually a representation of a Maori proverb called ka mua ka muri. Now, this is an image of a person walking backwards into the future. It suggests that the past is clearly visible, but the future is not. That we have imperfect information for the road ahead, but also that this is a natural state of affairs. We look back into history for clues to the way forward, but also with the understanding that the future is unwritten. The future, therefore, comes out of the past, but will not be identical to it. And for me, when I read these kinds of things, I immediately, especially for the purpose of this proverb, is that this proverb is exactly the same as the scientific method, in as much as we look backwards on the work we have done to inform the work that we will do going forward. And so there are many parallels with Māori knowledge and its relationship with Western knowledge, but this is just one that I've used today. There are many things, and these things are widely helpful. Now, relationship management is part of the whole package. Now, there are a number of ways to go about this also, and as you can see, this wasn't the right way to go about it. And this is how relationships can seem sometimes, but for Māori, we would prefer our relationship management to be something like this. A cup of tea with Auntie. Now, this might seem a little facetious too, but the Māori way of evaluating is exactly the way we want to do this. Now, the Māori way of doing it would be that our informal networks would tell us that somebody is in trouble, and an elder would go and visit a family and have a cup of tea with them and sit down. Now, the dynamics of this relationship are very similar to what we would use in the monitoring and evaluation space in science. Is that you've got a person who is respected, who has a little bit of power and a bit more knowledge, talking to someone who might be having problems with one facet or more in their business. And they sit down and they work things out and they talk together and they have a slice of cream sponge and they work their problems out and they solve them to where they are able to proceed. Now, for Māori, this is all part of the one package. It's part of the holistic picture. But here in science, we've seemed to separate monitoring and evaluation into a separate science. And that's fine. But mind what it is for us. Now, in the past, in conclusion, and in the past, things have kind of looked a little higgledy-piggledy for Maori. Remember, it's been 180 years since the Treaty of Waitangi was signed, and in some ways, we've kind of gone right back to the start. And so the past has looked like this. But we have found that through using Māori methods and by engaging with Māori in the way they want to, that things can actually get to be looking like this. You'll notice one bird flying off in the corner because you're never going to make everybody happy, and that's just the way it goes. But if you can get your relationships right, then good things start to happen, and eventually you might be able to expect different outcomes. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me today. That is my presentation on Māori farming and institutional readiness and working with Māori. Thank you.
Kia ora, George. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much for that. We've got a bit of time for a few more questions, if you're happy with that, George.
Sure.
So if people have questions, please feel free to type them in, and I'll pass them on. So one of them, one question that has already come through was looking at when you talked about that example of, for some iwi or hapu, what they may want is a quiet and peaceful life, and that's the sort of result they're looking for. How does that contrast then with research, which might be engaging with them and have different needs and different wants?
Well, that's a difficult question because you know, the objectives of each and every iwi are different, and so like I said, some are just looking for a lifestyle, but it's kind of a conflict with what the government is wanting in as far as a growth in GDP and a growth in the economy. However, I would imagine that the skills being used, the skills being learned, would be transferable to, say, a scaled up kind of an operation should they ever want to do those kinds of things, because things change. For example, some of the mahia land, which is rural land, is now used for a rocket launching site. You know, land uses change, people change with those times, and we are highly adaptive, and we are able to work within those kinds of things. I'm not sure if that answers your question, James.
I think it does get at it, yeah. Got another couple of questions that have come through. Firstly, a comment from Ina around that she loves your photos, and then she asks, how do we align up the project culture with the Māori way of working, where time is less relevant?
That is, boy, we wrestle with that one all the time, and what I would suggest for, especially for companies like AgResearch, would be to follow through with Māori science leaders and the organisation and structure of a Māori team to be able to, well, Māori who work in these spaces know of these challenges and would be better equipped to be able to say structure the work better, or to be able to fill in at a moment's notice when things all fall to custard at the last minute. So yeah, I think that is part and parcel of hiring the right people to do the work at each level.
Okay, good answer. Thanks, George. And then the final question that's come in is, what role does governance play in readiness for Māori?
Governance is enormous. It is one of the areas where we have an enormous, what would you say, a lack of talent and a lack of capability and capacity, and I believe that is part of the reason why underperformance has been been one of the features of Maori farming to date. We have all kinds of internal problems. The best, I guess, example was Tainui, who in the beginning, after their treaty settlement, wasted money on casinos and sports teams. They've since come to their senses and done remarkably well without those kinds of distractions. And so people making the right decisions at governance level is critical, and we lack numbers in that area.
Okay, well, thank you very much, George. There's no more questions, so really appreciate you putting together a great presentation to share the insights that you've gathered from your study of how AgResearch is engaging with different iwi and hapu in the area of agriculture throughout those elements. And I really like the framing that you've provided around the different levels of readiness and the importance of being ready for that engagement before entering into that relationship. I also love the importance of that you've highlighted around relationships, and that time as a critical element and capability a critical element to building that relationship. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. It's great to have everybody along, and thank you, George, for presenting, and finally thank you to Greg for coordinating the whole show. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.